Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker.
We need to yell at them again. All right.
The next speaker, Professor Uday from the Linder College of Business at the University of Cincinnati. Was a PhD student of Peter's in the 90s, so a significant cohort of students at the time. I have a nice personal connection to Uday because in the very first class I taught at Cornell, Uday was a student in that class. So Uday's worked across a wide range of areas, all overlapping stochasticity and supply chain and that, but today we're going to hear a somewhat different flavor work in applying operations research to manage patient flow in the OR and emergency department.
I'm really happy to be here. I wasn't sure what to talk about, but I wanted to be here because I missed Jack's retirement. And I felt so bad about it. But you know, there was this special needs kid I have, and it could happen. So it did. And I've come here now after a decade and a half. I came to the EPSOM conference, and it's amazing, things have changed. Some things have remained the same. So here I'm going to talk about celebrating Peter Jackson's service to Cornell through this talk. So how does that fit? And I try to think, how can I connect the two? So I'm going to talk about Peter as a farmer. You know Peter Jackson, the farmer? You know? No. Let me tell you about him. So what he does is, he plants these seeds and sows these ideas. And from these ideas, little plants grow. And then those plants get seeds. And they get planted again. And this is work done jointly with a PhD student of mine, young fella. And the surprising thing is, the dissertation I worked on, which Peter and I didn't get much papers out of, it came into this guy's dissertation. So I'm going to talk about that too. All right? So this talk is about patient flow in the OR. And for those of you who don't know me, because I'm a quiet guy, I stick to myself. I came here and studied manufacturing systems engineering without realizing that John Jenner had pushed the idea here, and it was RJMMR. Do you know what that is?
Oh, yes.
It was Jackson, Maxwell, Mugstead, and Roundy. It was a fantastic experience. And they were all back here this morning. I did my PhD thesis on something esoteric called cyclic scheduling. So it was a way of modeling repetitive manufacturing environments, including semiconductor vapor fabrication. And you had a bunch of things to be done on a bunch of resources. And you wanted to create a way of producing a repeating schedule that would have high throughput and low inventory. That was the idea that you were proposing earlier. So I worked on that, and thanks to Jack, I did a lot of inventory. And Roundy taught us the power of two. And I thought about it and I said, man, these are just fascinating ideas. All right? And then I tried to use these ideas. So if you think about what this got to do with patient flow in this area, actually, I took these ideas I learned, and when I reached Cincinnati, I looked for good research opportunities. So I'm here representing research, Peter Jackson, his PhD students. And then I looked, there were a lot of Fortune 500 companies. In fact, you might not know, Cincinnati has more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any other city in the United States. All you got to do is add the per capita. The population is not so large. But there are companies that are like growing and improving. When I reached Cincinnati, P&G was, you know P&G, everybody knows P&G. But today, Kroger, which is the grocery store company, is larger than P&G in revenue. So there were a whole bunch of opportunities. And I worked with some of them, including GE Aviation. So I actually did some inventory project on 500,000 parts, for the aircraft engines. And it's surprising all these connections that I see. But then it looked to me that if you look at the top employers in Cincinnati, they were all in healthcare. So after doing inventory, supply chain, I diversified into healthcare. And I'll tell you, there were some personal experiences, there were some local opportunities, and I just think healthcare is an interesting area for OR. So I tried to get into it, and Cincinnati Children's is top 3 children's hospitals in the United States, pretty consistently. So I went and visited them to look to see what makes them so good. How do they innovate? What do they do? And I looked around, and I work on the area now called operations management. So we look at improving quality, reducing waste, handling complexity, uncertainty, and inflexibility. And I thought the healthcare environment was a good one. Right? But the bottom line is, if you go to P&G or you go to Cincinnati Children's and say, I want to do work with you, they basically say, oh, I could go to Cornell, I could go anywhere and work with the best minds, so why should I work with you? I am measly University of Cincinnati kid. So what I did was, I said, I had a PhD, and I had a PhD in cyclic scheduling, all right? And I knew how to do repetitive manufacturing. And so I found a problem there where they wanted to schedule physicians. So they scheduled physicians one way today, and they had this satellite facility. The doctors there were unhappy with how unpredictable their schedules were. Sometimes they worked the morning shift, sometimes the afternoon shift, sometimes the night shift, and then they had to come back in 2 days to a morning shift. And this they didn't like. And they said, why don't we have something more predictable, where we know and we can manage our life around our work schedule then? And that's where we said, let's try this idea of cyclic scheduling. And what came out of it? There was an interfaces paper, which is an informed journal on applied operations research, and we used integer programming models to create a schedule for these physicians for each quarter. And they actually implemented it, and we surveyed them after that, and they said things like, oh, we love this schedule. And the healthcare area is different from manufacturing, because there was one lady, one physician, she only wanted to work at night shift. And they all have their own preferences, and they all have their own contracts on how many hours they can work, which made the problem interesting. I also had another PhD student, and she was interested in inventory. So for Cincinnati Children's, we did 2 projects on inventory control. And the first project was a new inventory policy that was used for, how do I describe this? It's a vending machine for drugs, medical drugs, all right? And they basically store drugs in that vending machine, and the nurse who needs it logs into the machine and says, I need this medicine for this patient, and then the system basically allows her to take that medicine and charges the patient. That's what it does. It's a vending machine of sort. And we worked on how to manage the inventory in this vending machine. And the thing that made the problem interesting was that they had 2 kinds of replenishments. So they would do replenishments periodically, like at the beginning of the shift, and they would pack it up. And they would do replenishments when they were out of stock situations, which could happen randomly at any time. And so it was a combination of the periodic, power of 2 kind of policies with a continuous policy that was more responsive to inventory shortages. We did that kind of stuff. So after that, I got invited to go further and check out some operating rooms. So I spent about 8 hours on a couple of days at 2 or 3 locations at the operating rooms of Cincinnati Children, seeing how they do, these ENT tubes they put into little kids, seeing how different it was from manufacturing. Because when they take 2 different kids and make them go under so they can do the surgical procedure, it's really amazing how different these kids respond. And it's really amazing to see how different the anesthesiologists operate. They all use different procedures. So I looked at that, and the purpose of that project was to identify why the base had so much poorer performance than a satellite facility, whether they could transfer any learning from one to the other. So we gave them some recommendations, and I in my hurry to get done, I skipped an idea here. So I wonder if I can go back to this. So I'm going to come to this patient flow idea in a second. So before I go to that idea, I wanted to put something I just saw on Peter Jackson's website, his research interests. And I read through it, and so I look at the bottom paragraph. And what I want you to note out of this is, the amazing thing is, in all these projects, this is exactly what I do. I model a stochastic system with uncertainty. I try to develop either approximations or simulation models that can give you the performance that you, which also in some ways is an approximation. And then we come up with approaches to improve performance using the simulation model. That's what I'm going to do. And I have about 2-3 areas I applied the same systems thinking approach to. So I'm going to talk about patient flow in operating rooms. I know that attention spans are weak. They're bored. So I put cartoons here and there. You can't read the cartoon. There's a waiting room, and there's a note out there that says, "Thank you for suffering in silence." I don't want you to suffer in silence, so if you want to interrupt, feel free. I can do the 5-minute version of this, move, and move forward. And the other thing I want to say is that, I was also curious one time about the origin of names, and the origin of words. So I actually looked at the origin of the word patient. Does anybody know the origin? All right, so apparently it comes from Latin. And there's some sound pati and patian in Latin, which means suffering. So you be patient, you gotta suffer. If you are a patient, you're suffering somehow. And added to your physical suffering is this mental agony of having to wait in the waiting room. All right? And if you look at it globally, we spend thousands of hours waiting in our lunch time. Just like we spend, and the average person probably spends 20 years sleeping. And I experimented with the necessity of that and learned, unfortunately, that it was necessary. Then you could reduce it for some time, but then you crash out. Right? So I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about flexibility. Right? There's another theme I learned from Peter Jackson that's going to show up. It's everywhere, actually. And it's called balance. So you're going to see that this flexibility is going to talk about balance. So where does Peter fit in balance? Right? So in my mind, actually, I look at him and I worked with him. One of the things I learned from him is the importance of balance. So what is that? It's balancing your work life with your personal life, balancing your research with your teaching. And I just love the way that he did it. And so you're going to see the idea of the importance of balance also here. All right? So here's the problem description. And some of this, I got to say I subscribe to this thing called JIT, just in time. It's also, there's a philosophy called lean in the Toyota production system. And what it says is that you want to avoid waste, you want to do stuff just in time. So in a system of avoiding waste, I begged and borrowed Jan's slides. Some of it has more words than I would like, but it was so quick to do. It only took me less time, so I did. So here's his description. There's an OR on their room, and they have two pressures. On one hand, they want to be efficient, and on the other hand, they need to be responsive. And they have two segments of customers that they have these surgeries. One is elective surgery. So, you need a surgery, you elect to have the surgery, you schedule it on a particular date and a particular time. But the suite of operating rooms are also shared with emergencies. They come randomly, right? And the emergencies are more urgent typically, right? And so if there is scheduled surgery and an emergency comes in, when the surgery is done, the scheduled surgery is done, the emergency will go into the operating room, and preempt the next elective surgery from occurring. See that? And so that's because they need to be responsive to all these emergencies, but they want to also make the most amount of money and be cost effective when it comes to electives. And that's basically the seesaw. There are basically two objectives, and they have to manage and balance these two objectives. And the question is, how do you balance efficiency and responsiveness? These are ideas that in the area of supply chain have been propounded several times. So I'm going to show you two extremes that can be used. So on the left is what they were using at the time. And it's called a flexible policy. So all their operating rooms were designed to handle either emergencies or electives. And they would basically follow the elective schedule till an emergency came. And then the first available operating room would be used to handle the emergency. Right? And that would delay any surgeries that were electively planned at that operating room. That's basically what would happen. Right? And so that's, every OR, and here there are 4 of them, could do both types of surgeries. And on this dimension, there was someone called Fred Reichman, who was the physician in charge of these operating rooms, and someone called Eugene Linder at Boston, who was a researcher who kind of suggested that if you want to control the amount of variability that the system experiences, that the one way to handle that variability was to use something called a dedicated or focused policy. And what that does is it takes 1 or 2 operating rooms and dedicates it to emergencies. So only emergencies can use those rooms, right? And similarly, you can dedicate some rooms to just the electives. And now there is no interference between the electives and the emergencies. You schedule the electives and the elective ORs, and they go per schedule, barring all the variability in processing times, surgery duration, right? And the emergencies have access to their own OR. Yeah?
Is there a difference in cost of making a more flexible room?
Yeah, so we asked them this, and actually they were able to, so the quick answer is there isn't much cost. There is some changeover process to get kits ready, and in some ways that is large enough. There was nothing particular, so there's no cost difference in our model, and there's no cost difference that they told us. But if there were, you could use our model to see, if the cost of being flexible, which cost would you think is higher? It's not quite clear also, right? So it turns out that the cost of being flexible is higher, which you might guess. You can actually see whether that focus policy gives enough benefits to make up. And so it was being suggested they were considering it. But there were also other people. Dr. Reichman was also saying things like, wait a minute, something's not quite okay here. Because in this system, what's the problem?
You have 2 emergencies.
Yeah, if you have multiple emergencies coming, what will you do? Right? So the answer to that was,
Look at the data.
well, look at the data. It's always a good answer. You're like a consultant, independence. So here's what they decided. They said, we're going to let the emergencies go first to their dedicated rooms, but if on occasion there are more, we're going to only then interrupt the elective surgeries. Okay? And that, yeah?
When you say interrupt, you mean let them finish what they're doing?
Yes. So it's called non-preemptive.
Yes.
In the scheduling world, we call it non-preemptive. So you don't just throw the person out. That in healthcare would be
Great.
I don't know. It depends on what your goals are, always. All right. So that's where we came in, and the kind of research questions we asked. And I'm sorry for all the words. So what we wanted to know is the newer policy good? Is it better? How much better? When is it better? And then we kind of wanted to know what's the key trade-off, right? So in here, the thing that I put out here for you to think about is that if electives in a flexible system, like the first one, right, the electives have access to 4 rooms, whereas there they have access to only 3 rooms, right? So in terms of capacity, the electives like this system. In terms of access to capacity, they have access to potentially 4 ORs instead of just 3 ORs. But because of the interference being more here than there, remember the emergency would go into the dedicated server first and only interrupt if needed. So maybe if 2 emergencies don't come frequently enough, there won't be as much interruption. Right? So there are 2 things that are in play here. One is the amount of capacity electives have access to, and the other thing is the amount of interruption that they face. And that was one thing we wanted to study, that when is what more important? You know, sometimes capacity is more important, sometimes the interferences are more important. So we basically use their data to try to figure out what is more important for their environment. And then the third thing we looked at is, you know, just about a few years, there was a seminal paper by Steve Graves on flexibility in the automotive sector, and it said this key principle that a little bit of flexibility goes a long way. So we said, is there a partial flexibility solution that they can consider? What would it look like? All right. And so here are the cases that we consider. Fully dedicated. H stands for high priority. You could think of them as emergencies. L are lower priority. You could think of them as electives. And then here you have all 6 operating rooms being flexible. And here you have some that are dedicated to low priority, some that are dedicated to high priority, and some that are flexible. And the idea is partial flexibility, just conceptually, should beat the others. Why? So you come here, you've got to think. I'm not one of those guys that say, oh, we're having fun. I don't know. So then, you know, you'll see. All right, so one of the reasons why partial flexibility is so good is, we are going to try to decide how many rooms to have dedicated to high, flex, and low. And because we have that choice, we can choose fully dedicated. We can choose fully flexible. Right? So we would choose this only if, from our objective, it's better. So this actually expands the set of choices. Because the choice of how many rooms to dedicate, how many to keep flexible, is one of the decisions that we make. And what's our modeling approach? We've actually tried a few modeling approaches. The one I'm going to talk about here is we've modeled these operating rooms using a discrete event simulation model that was implemented in something called ARENA. And part of the reason was that the system to model all of its traits, it was easiest to do it by building a computer simulation. Because the simulation could handle all of the little details that they wanted us to look at. But we also looked at a queuing approximation version to kind of support that even in that kind of environment, you will see similar kind of results and analysis. So the queuing system looks something like this. And there are arrivals of high priority customers. There are arrivals at some rate of low priority customers. And then there are the operating rooms. So I want to say there are 3 pieces to this puzzle. The first piece is something called flow allocation. So when a low priority customer comes in, it's not so easy to say, should that guy go to the dedicated low priority or should they go to the flexible? Right? Because you don't know where the waiting time will be lower. Right? Because you can't say, just send them to dedicated because there might be too many patients already in that queue. So sending them there will make them wait a long time. Right? So you have to actually decide how to split the flows. So that's the flow allocation problem. So in the simulation, we had some way of doing that flow allocation. We tested a collection of approaches based on what they said they wanted to see done, and then we picked a heuristic allocation rule. In the queuing approach, we actually optimized this by picking different flow allocation proportions. The second problem that's there is how do you do the allocation? And the performance metric that we are looking at is patient waiting time. And we've got patient waiting time for the low priority customers and for the high priority customers. And that also gets split by whether they went to a dedicated facility or whether they went to a flexible facility, and it gets combined. All right. So we have two performance metrics: waiting time for low priority customers, waiting time for high priority customers. Yeah.
Do you differently weight the high priority waiting times because
Yeah.
it'd be more urgent?
Yes, and I'm going to skip a bunch of slides, but if you see behind there's a math programming model that optimizes the expected waiting time that is weighted, as in WEIGHTED, by high and low, so that there would be a multiplier for the high, and you could change the multiplier to generate a trade-off curve. So what I'm going to show you later is a trade-off that says, here's the expected waiting time of high, here's the expected waiting time of low, and how it changes as you might change that weight that you give to high priority customers, which presumably is higher, because their waiting time is more important. Okay, we're a specific model, a specific environment, and we put it into the computer. That's the fast way of summarizing this. But if you want, you can see that this starts every day at 7 a.m., empty. And there are 20 operating rooms. There's also some block schedule, confounding the speed. But it's an 8-hour shift, but they run overtime. So if they don't get done by the 8-hour shift, they don't just say goodbye and walk away. They've got to take care of the patient, right? And they work overtime, but that's also another performance criteria. Besides the waiting time, they don't like too much overtime. And the elective patient schedule was put in as an input, and emergencies arrived randomly according to this lovely Poisson process. All right? And we worked with some data. We had 16 weeks of data on total workload, number of cases for elective and emergency. We translated it into kind of a per day, 8-hour model. On average, there was 75 electives each day and 12 emergencies. And we modeled the processing times using some distribution called the log normal with some parameters. These are details. So the bottom line out of all of this is we want to know how many to dedicate to emergencies, that's N1 or NH for high, how many to keep flexible, how many to keep dedicated. So there are actually only two variables because the total number of rooms is capital N, 20, that's fixed. All right? And because of the arrival rates, there are only certain combinations of N1 plus N2 or N2 plus N3 that will work, because N1 plus N2 is the total number of rooms that emergencies have access to, right? And if they arrive too fast, then if there aren't enough rooms, the utilization of those rooms will exceed 100%, and that means the waiting time will be just horrible. So that would never be a good solution to have a really large waiting time. So there are some limits on the total values of that we also implemented. We also came up with a way of that flow allocation. How do we assign patients to operating rooms? We tested different ways. There's a slide with our actual assignment, which I'm going to skip. Our output measures were, as I said, patient wait times. The simulation actually also gives us more than the average compared to like a queuing approximation. It gives us a whole histogram of waiting time distributions. So you will see something that says maximum wait time, because they cared about maximum wait time, not just the average wait time in the queue. They wanted to know about how much overtime there was, and they wanted to keep an eye on room utilization. So that they didn't want the ORs to not be too busy. Okay? And this is presented here just to show you the structure. So we build a model, and then we also do some sensitivity analysis that says what would happen if things change. So we did some sensitivity analysis. We increased the volume of emergencies. We increased the processing time variance. We also did things like model validation, verification, to make sure the precision of the results was going to be good enough. And here's the overview of our results, right? it turned out that the focus policy was worse for emergencies. And strangely, the electives may prefer less dedicated capacity than experiencing emergency disruption. So actually, the focus policy was better for the electives. So originally they were thinking we should dedicate these rooms to these emergencies because they'll be available when the emergency is needed and the emergencies will be served quicker and better. But when we looked at the waiting time statistics, we saw that actually by doing this dedication of rooms to emergencies, it was the electives that were better off. And the reason they got better off was because they were really hurt by all these interruptions. Because the interruption would disrupt the elective schedule a lot, and that would make the OR go into overtime. Whereas by having this dedicated emergency ORs, there were fewer interruptions that came into the fewer rooms that the electives now had. So actually, in this environment, the answer to the question of is less capacity worse or is more interruption worse, the answer was more interruption is worse in this environment. That's the conclusion we came up with. And finally, as you might expect, the partially flexible policy, it trumps either of these policies. Okay? And I don't know if you want to see any of the details, but when you think about the focus policy, with 20 rooms, if you want to dedicate, how many rooms should you dedicate to electives? How many should you dedicate to emergencies? Right? That's also kind of a question. And so on this chart, I show you that, forget about the batch, just focus on maybe batch 15, which is a blue line. And what you see is that there is a trade-off. So on this axis, emergency wait time. On this axis, elective wait time. These are average values. Okay? And each dot here represents one room allocation. So this one had 6 rooms dedicated to emergencies. This one had 5 rooms dedicated to emergencies. That one had 4 rooms dedicated to emergencies. Right? So once you draw a picture like this, and you ask, if you use a focus policy, how many rooms should you dedicate to emergencies? What would the answer be? Should it be 3 rooms? Should it be 6 rooms? Or should it be something else?
It depends.
I'm going to make you all stand up and bounce up and down a few times. So I'll explain this. So if you dedicate 3 rooms to emergencies, right, you'll be up there. So your emergency wait time is really high. Your elective wait time is really low. Okay? If you perturb that and say, I'm going to dedicate 1 more room to emergency, what you're going to see? You're going to see a massive reduction in the emergency wait time from up there down to here, and a relatively smaller increase in the elective wait time. So what should you do? Go from 3 to 4.
Wait.
Yes?
How long did you anticipate the change, the cleaning of the OR from one patient to the next? Because it's longer than these times.
Yeah, and actually these times are the wait times for the elective from their scheduled start time. So it's only the wait time in the queue.
Okay, but if I have these emergencies,
And actually the processing times,
I mean, typically it takes 40 minutes to clean an OR.
yeah,
So,
I see the point you're making. So what we do is the clean time, the change time, in some ways it is put into the processing time.
okay.
Okay, so let us say the emergency takes an hour and a half,
Okay.
and the elective takes
You included that in the
40 minutes, and that's how the model is. And all I'm showing you is not the total flow time to get through the system, just the waiting time in the queue to get into the OR.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are, yeah.
I've been wondering you have constrained capacity and then you're faced with increasing demand of both emergency and elective surgery.
Yes.
And you have a situation where you have your partial flexible policy,
Right.
where all of the flexible and high dedicated rooms are busy, but you have some emergencies. Aren't you then going to defer the elective surgeries because life and limb is at stake, and then you're going to migrate to fully flexible all over again?
This is a good practical issue, and what we show is with the environment we have, the probability and the frequency of the situation you are describing is not too high. But if it becomes high, what they do is, in practice, they temporarily, Dr. Reichman can switch the allocation so that he can allow a particular room. He can even allow an emergency OR to be used by an elective if the elective schedule is way out of whack and they do not anticipate a problem, and they do some selection. They take the shortest elective and put that into the emergency so that it doesn't take a long time. So in the background, they are doing a lot of different ideas. They do some patient streaming also.
The word dedicated is under...
Yeah, so in the simulation though, it is dedicated. So in the simulation, it does not allow, and then the patient would just wait. We do not have an indicator of the quality of the person's surgery experience or the deterioration, and these are so when we model this, we sort of keep aside the trauma kind of patient, because trauma trumps all of this. That means if there is risk of death, all of this lies. Yeah, but the majority of the patients do not fall in that category. I'm going to show you that in the ER department over here.
So I think I understood it from the model you described that all of the operating rooms in this particular system have identical capabilities.
Yes,
Is
yes,
that true?
yes.
So I'm wondering whether that's a realistic assumption. In other words, somebody comes in with a particular type of emergency surgery and it's got to get done in one of those 5 rooms.
Right, and actually we looked at that in the following way, that we actually did this for a smaller number of ORs. So there is like ortho and ENT, and basically these 20 ORs get split up. And what we did was we just threw the variability into the processing times and let anyone go anywhere. But the reality is there are segments. But within the segments also, you could use an idea like this, like you have only 4 ORs for ortho and you would consider dedicating 1. But the bottom line out of all of this, there are 2 ideas. I'm going to then move forward. The 2 ideas is, if you did dedicated, you have to pick the number of rooms to dedicate. And in this case, 5 balances the trade-off in the waiting times, because no perturbation makes one party very much better off with the other party only a little bit worse off. And that was the idea. And actually, finally, we kind of saw that flexibility, the way they were operating previously, was indeed a better approach most of the times. Okay.
So, did I hear you say that you were basically thinking about trauma patients?
We are not doing trauma so much.
So what kind of emergencies are you thinking about?
Well, you can be an emergency patient needing care in the surgery, even though it's not life-threatening, in the sense that somebody's badly broken the bone.
The kind of surgeries.
They know what to do.
Yeah. So the golden hour kind of rule that people worry about is, in other words, if you don't treat somebody and they're not in the OR within an hour, the probability of their surviving drops precipitously.
Right. So
you're not worried about that.
I am not looking at trauma patients. So in doing some of this work, we have to, we made some assumptions, and then this is also Cincinnati. If I were at LA, I couldn't do this because at LA, the proportion of emergencies is much larger than the electives. But at Cincinnati, they do a lot of elective surgeries for children. They actually plan it out, and the volume of emergencies is relatively lower. And actually, for trauma cases, they don't need all of this. They will put them wherever. And if somebody has to wait 1 hour on an empty stomach for elective surgery, the parents will understand if you say that this is going to save someone else's life. Just 1 hour of your time will save someone's life. People don't complain so much. So that's.
Someone might be appendectomy. That's not trauma, but that's an emergency.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll come to that when I do emergency room. Maybe that's
No,
that.
that's what he said at Jackson point. It doesn't have to be trauma. To have an emergency.
And it's painful. On the pain scale, when that happens, even bladder stones, people have high pain scale, but it's pretty much they know the procedure to be followed and things like that. All right, so I'll try to summarize this because, as usual, I'm going slower than I expected. So, we have some statistics that kind of show you the average elective wait time, the average emergency wait time, the maximum elective wait time, the maximum emergency wait time, and we provided them such kind of statistics. We compared the two policies in terms of overtime and room utilization, and we did some sensitivity analysis, and I could go through the details, but I think at best I should read that the flexible policy is better suited for situations with higher variability. Because, if you see, this was the base case, right, for flexible and the base case for focus. With higher variability, the wait times increase, as you might expect, right? But from focus to focus, the wait time increased 3 times. Whereas from flexible to flexible, the wait time got doubled. So the amount of increase in the wait time with variability is lower for the flexible policy. And so in some sense, we pushed them back towards more of a flexible or a partially flexible room allocation. Okay.
Those are in hours?
No, these are in minutes. I mean, they're in hours previously.
0.05 minutes.
Yeah, but it's a simulation too. And it's also because that's also another very strange thing that when variability increased, the average emergency wait time went down. And part of the reason is that when processing and variability of electives increases, there are a lot of long jobs, there are a lot of short jobs. And the emergencies can take advantage of the short guys because rooms come available more frequently. Something like that was happening. You're right. They are incredibly short. So
the
they are
reason
not.
I'm chuckling, though, is because in my experience in working with these, that in these hospitals, that when it gets done earlier, they cannot take advantage of the time because they have not prepared the resources to clean a room, get the next patient in, all that.
We looked into that aspect also. There was a surgical processing department that makes the kits and delivers them. But that's
it's one of the areas of hospital management that's extraordinarily needs considerable.
So what I'm using this to show you are 2 things. One is that what you learn at Cornell in systems engineering, you can apply willy-nilly to lots of areas. And healthcare has no shortage of problems and a big shortage of good solutions. And the problem is, even the ideas like lean, we tried this out. We tried lean. It doesn't work unless you get some very key parties on board. You have to have the CEO out there. You have to be the lean guy, should be on board. You have to have the nurses, the physicians all on board. only then it gets implemented. So we actually did lean instead at another CCHMC problem environment. It has to do with infant mortality.
Yeah.
It's another, strangely, Hamilton County, at least some zip codes in Hamilton County, which is where Cincinnati is, they have some of the highest infant mortalities in the United States. I did not know that before I saw the project. And so they've done these things with one zip code to try to reduce that premature birth, which is highly correlated to infant mortality. And they face all these social and environmental issues that need to be addressed. So there are amazing things you can do. So I'm going to just show you this slide. The blue bar is the elective wait time. The red bar is the emergency wait time. What you start here is this middle one is how many is flexible, and the left is how much you dedicate to emergencies. The right is how much you dedicate to electives. All right. So this is where they were fully flexible, right? And we tried through the simulation dedicating one of these flexible rooms, right? And it turned out between dedicating it to electives and dedicating to emergencies, it was better to dedicate to emergencies. So we dedicated to emergency. We repeated that again, it was better to dedicate to emergency. So I'm showing you some of the options we tried out. And what you see out here is that partial flexibility, right? Little bit of dedication did not make these numbers deteriorate too much because they were already pretty small. But those numbers of the elective wait times came down significantly. You want to hear a story of a personal situation I experienced myself. I was in the ER where, I wish they could go down this this path because my boy waited there for 4 hours. And I knew then that there was a better way to do it. So we studied that problem too. We also looked at the opposite, that if you were fully focused, 5 dedicated to emergencies, 15 to electives, it was the best solution. And you thought to become a little flexible, what would happen? And we saw that by being a little flexible, you would get a big improvement in the emergency wait time with a little bit of deterioration for the elective wait time. So again, this is an improvement. But the bottom line thing is that these ones worked out better than that one in general. So if you have, if you have little bit of dedication, buys you a lot in this fully flexible environment. That's basically one of the conclusions. The principles are said in English too. I'll skip this. I'll skip sensitivity. I'll go to conclusions just so we can pause. Then it'll allow me to reflect on what I want to do next. All right. So the idea was, shifting from flexible to focused policies, the elective patient time, the average wait time, and physician overtime decrease, while emergency patient average wait time slightly increases. A partial flexibility is better than the focused policy. Partial flexibility, mostly flexible rooms tend to perform better. So, that's pretty much what this picture was trying to say, that, these guys perform better than that guy because the elective weights are similar, the emergency weight here is smaller, and things of that nature. Right? So after this, we tried to do something in the emergency department. And in the emergency department, the difference is now you have patients that have trauma. And actually, this was motivation for looking at the emergency department. There is increasing demand in the emergency department. Number of ED visits have been increasing in the past. And the costs are also increasing. There are resource shortages. In fact, there are stories of people dying in the emergency department waiting. I mean, it's just horrible. And the system they use there is something called ESR. So, and that's what their classification is. And this is in the healthcare system. It's used all the time. All right? And it looks like this. They do some triage. When the patient comes in, is the patient dying? If the answer is yes, that's a trauma patient. that patient has priority 1. They are the highest priority. And if the patient is not dying, but there is risk of a problem with the situation, then they become an ESI 2. Otherwise, they go into this thing that says, how many resources do they need? Do they need few resources? Do they need no resources? They are low priority. They need few resources. They are ESI 4. And otherwise, they become ESI 3 or may get upgraded to ESI 2. So they have a triage that's well established, and they use that triage to decide who to serve next. Okay? So I'm going to skip something called fast track, which is something we tried out. I'm going to talk about something called dynamic prioritization of an idea. So here's what happened. My son, when he was 2 years old, he was hyperactive and whatnot. And he bumped his head somewhere. And the skin got cut, gory stuff, on the head. So we took him to the pediatrician, and they said he needs to go to the emergency. It was 3 o'clock also when I got this information, and I said, well, what does he need? And they said he needed some staples, 3 staples, they guessed. And I looked at the time, and I was at UC, which is about 30 minutes away from where I live. And I said, at 6 o'clock, the urgent care facility close to our house will be able to take this boy. So let us ask the doctor if he can go there at 6 o'clock. And the doc, because I've been there like that place actually. And the doc said, no, you got to go to BASE. And BASE is the main Cincinnati children's facility. It's close to UC, but my home is half an hour away. So I went back, and she said, take him as soon as possible. I brought him in. And the thing to know about this ER is that 3 or 4 o'clock is the time when they have the highest number of patients. Now he came there, and he needed these 3 staples, and it took 4 hours. And I looked at the process. So the process is you come in, you register, and then the triage person looks at it and says, oh, he's stable. He put something to make sure there was no infection, and he said, please wait. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And then they took him in to the OR. And I was looking, actually, I'm one of those guys who jumps from rooftop to rooftop. They looked at him, one person held him down, the other person went, bang, 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 done. And I said, wow, I waited 3 hours for that. And I said, how would you do it differently? So what I said you should do actually is track how much time you think the patient takes, track how long they've been waiting. So if I'm an ESI 5, I need few resources, or a 4, and that is the majority of patients the ERC. What you might want to do is track the process time expected and track the waiting time. So after a patient has waited for 2 hours, you might want to say, take this patient, get him done, it'll take 10 minutes, and throw him out. And the other guy who's a 3, if he waited 10 minutes, so he has pain, he has a headache, he can take a little bit more medicine, he'll still be fine in 10 minutes, because his procedure is going to take half an hour or more, right? And that's where the next idea came up, and it's called dynamic prioritization. So I am pretty much out of time, so I don't know how much to say. These were the distributions of, the ER arrival, and this is about 3-4 o'clock. The story I was telling you. So I'll skip all of this stuff. The bottleneck's always the physicians. At one time it was rooms, but they took care of rooms and beds. All right, forget about fast track. So that's my little boy, and that was the source of dynamic prioritization. And the little boy is the story could be the topic of a totally different talk, which would be more amazing than this talk, but I'll keep that aside. All right. So, what we did was, I'll give you the short version so you have time to take a break and you ask some questions, give me some inputs and stuff like that. So what we did was, we had a simulation of this ER, and again we kept aside the trauma patients We only focused on mostly on 3, 4, and 5, but there was a slide that shows you the proportions. You know, it's a table that looks something like this. You can see that ESI 1 is 0.04%, and 4s and 5s make about 75% of the volume handled by the emergency room. So, you know, we basically kept them out of this analysis because, you know, there's no question of dynamic prioritization when trauma's there. They get priority 1, no matter what. They get all the resources. And so we tried out different kinds of rules, and even with ESI priority, there's actually multiple steps in the ER process. So the busy doctor has to see the patient more than once. So we also had to decide how to prioritize whether a physician sees a new patient or a returning patient who went for lab work or something like that. And one of the things we noticed, the top row says expected waiting times, that they first come, first serve, and the second row prioritizes waiting patients higher. So the physician would see someone they've already seen who need to see them only. They would give them higher priority than a new patient who anyone could see. And that made a big difference in the waiting times, as you can see. All right. And the final thing that I'm going to note here, which is actually a few slides down, so I could go back. I'll skip this part. The final thing I wanted to say is that by adjusting the weights, remember you asked about the weights? By adjusting the weights given to like the ESI 2, 3 patients, giving them higher weights, it's actually possible to come up with a solution that is even better than ESI priority, especially if you look at the last column. Those large number of ESI 5 patients, their average weight goes down to about 56 from 94. The ESI 4's weight time increases slightly. You know, nothing comes for free. But the whole belief we have come to with all of this is that dynamic prioritization can be a very good way for them to manage the system. It does a lot better than other approaches they have considered, including something they call fast track. And fast track is a way where they make a track for only these 4 or 5 patients so that they can speed them up through the system. It does better than that fast track that we studied also. And it seemed like fast track needed other improvements, process time or additional resources like physicians, assistants, scribes to actually make a big difference. So that's the kind of bottom line conclusion out of this. With a careful choice of weights, you can use dynamic prioritization that takes care of total accumulated wait time in the queue to make better decisions on who to see next. And the dynamic prioritization is more beneficial than this really popular fast track. By the way, dynamic prioritization is not done in practice yet. It's also how do they do it, and what they need is they need OR in an app. Once it's there, they'll do it. And so somebody has to build that app. Of course. So I want to end with 30 seconds to say the following. I want to thank all of you for your attention, but I particularly want to thank Peter Jackson. Not just for teaching me about balance in life, teaching me about cyclic scheduling, but also about everything else that I remember, even they were so distant and few. One thing, of course, is that he's the reason why I'm at the University of Cincinnati as a faculty member. When I was graduating, some of the PhD students might think about this. I thought I'd join a company, something like, maybe even Google or something upcoming, because Pine and all that internet was coming up at that time. And he said, you'll have fun at the university, try it. And he told me of a job at the University of British Columbia, which I went to, loved it. And that got me into academia. Finally, as you know, in food services, the other thing I really remember, and you might not, is all the times you took me sailing on the week. Thank you. Thank you.
We have time for a quick question.
There are many hospitals, more than almost
to the emergency department because they don't have any access to any other doctor. In your case, you go into physician first. But most people just use it because then no doctor will accept that.
And actually, this is why this is Cincinnati Children's and the LA ER. It has that, and that is a problem with the system. That people who don't have insurance, they can go to see for a well visit. They can't see a doctor to keep their health, but they can go to an ER, and the ER cannot deny them service, and they don't get much money back. So my kids' visit to the ER, I was astonished how much they charge the insurance company for that.
I mean, for instance, if you're going to the emergency department to get an antibiotic, a prescription from an antibiotic, you know, you have the alternative. They don't have to see a physician; they can see a nurse practitioner.
Yeah, and actually I did.
That is what they should do.
Yes, and actually they do that at Cincinnati Children's. You know, you don't get to be top 3 just like that. So in the flu season, they will have a separate track for flu people with a small room on the side, so those people don't infect the others, and they just need things like antibiotics or something like that. And they have some of that, but they've not resolved this issue of people on Medicaid coming to ERs. They have not figured out how to do
You're
that.
saying that's not a problem at this hospital?
Yes, that's partly because it's a children's hospital, and I guess.
Children don't have insurance either.
Yeah, I agree. And so there's another thing about healthcare is that they cannot give us some statistics. So the data didn't really tell us that this was a Medicaid or a not insured patient. So there was nothing we could do about this, some HIPAA or something like that. So Privacy Act. They can't tell us that kind of information.
So most of what I saw today was focused on trying to improve wait times, in some sense the quality of the patient experience.
Right.
Have you thought much about cost? You see opportunities, what you've learned so far about the emergency department or the operating room, do you see opportunities to reduce costs based on what you're studying here?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But I will tell you this, that when Obamacare came in, Cincinnati Children's anticipated a big reduction in the payments they would get from insurance companies. Then they launched a massive venture to reduce costs. Some of the inventory stuff I did was focused on reducing inventory, working capital, things like that. And they actually implemented other means to reduce costs. So they had more urgent care facilities that were staffed by cheaper labor, if you might look at it that way. So they could channel people through that urgent care whenever possible. They did end up doing what I thought they should have done with my child, send him to the urgent care. And they are now busing people also, even dynamically. If the ED is very busy, they will bus them to the urgent care. So the answer is that they've been working on this. They did it so successfully that when Obamacare came, somehow they did such a good job. And there must be a ton of hospitals that did not. Because of those hospitals, the payments that Cincinnati Children's got did not go down as anticipated, and they were left with a lot of money. So they built a new...
Away money incentive.
No, they built a new research building 10 floors high and financed it totally from the money there.
I just feel like a lot of what you're doing and some of the other people in the room could really be brought to bear on these types of situations.
Yeah, but you know,
in those operations, if they had the incentive.
The quality improvement people...
He works in doing all this Medicare payment stuff, so he's quite attuned to all this.
Yeah, so maybe I shouldn't have said what I said. You know, I don't work for Cincinnati Children's, so I do not know what really happened.
So with that, maybe we'll break for lunch. Thank you, Uday, again.